Okay, let's try this again. I kind of got messed up this last time, but today we're going to talk about Lecture 21. Holy cow, Lecture 21. Wow, and we're not even halfway through the year yet. This is going to be great. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is the rise of the Second American Party system and other political influences that were going on in the early 19th century. The early 19th century is where we're going to start to see this new American nation and the citizens of that nation really starting to get their feet wet politically. We're going to see expanded suffrage. We're going to see some very serious... pardon me. We've also seen some very, very serious shifts in the demographics and in society, which is also going to present some problems that people are going to want addressed, and they're going to want to have those problems addressed politically. So we're going to jump right into this, and before we really get into the second system, we're going to review a little bit. So, our essential question, students will analyze the political changes taking place in the United States in the early 19th century, which corresponds with Key Concept 4.1 in the AP Guide. So, before we get onto this, let's talk a little bit and just do a little quick reminder of the first American Party system. And as you remember, the first American Party system was based on the conflicts between the Democratic Republicans, represented by Thomas Jefferson and by James Madison and some others, and the Federalists, the more conservative Federalists, who were represented by John Adams and Alexander Hamilton. And these were groups. These were simply people who had some very basic differences in their ideas on how government should be run. Of course, the Democratic Republicans wanted to have a little bit more democracy, a little bit more say among the people. They also wanted to have a weaker central government and allow more power to the states. They were strict constructionists. They believed the Constitution should be followed, although, as we've seen in earlier lectures, they weren't entirely strict on that themselves. The Federalists, on the other hand, wanted to have a stronger central government to provide for social stability, which is pretty much what makes them conservative. They were interested in direct investments in the society, such as Alexander Hamilton's, what's going to become the American system, strong national bank, things along those lines. So. And what's going to ultimately end up happening is these different ideas are going to start their own societies, they are going to start their own institutions, their own publications, and they will become full-blown political parties. Now, what's going to happen to this first American Party system? Well, ultimately, in short, the Democratic Republicans win. And a big reason why they won is because they were the party that was more likely to expand suffrage. By expanding suffrage, more people were able to vote for them, and they were able to get more of a popular following. And they're going to win in a series of elections, most notably the election of 1800. Well, ultimately, what happens to the poor Federalists? They don't just drop off the face of the earth. The Federalists continue on. Under the leadership of James Monroe, the United States is going to enter into a very, sweetly brief period known as the Era of Good Feelings. And this Era of Good Feelings is one in which you basically have one party, an overall consensus on how to run the government, and the Democratic Republicans are actually going to incorporate the Federalists into their party, and consequently are going to incorporate some Federalist ideas into the party, such as the National Bank. So this is the first American Party system, but it's not going to last very long. This era of good feelings will come to an abrupt end. In fact, it won't survive the Monroe administration. The bottom line is that the era of good feelings will be done in by an economic crisis that's going to hit in 1819, that's going to discredit some of the proponents of the American system. Certainly it's going to discredit the National Bank, which is supposed to provide for economic security, and in 1819 that wasn't happening. We're also going to see a very contentious election in 1824. I'm going to jump ahead real quick so we can talk about the election of 1824, and then I'm going to come back. So here we have the election of of 1824, and as you can see, this was a contested election mostly between a fellow by the name of John Quincy Adams, yes, the son of John Adams, and Andrew Jackson, our buddy from the War of 1812. Now, what we have here is the situation where, look, do I have my magic pen? Let me get my magic pen going. Take a look here. This is the popular vote. Right? And as you can see, the popular vote is going to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson wins the popular vote. However, we can also kind of see up here, if we take a look at the electoral vote, what happens? Well, Andrew Jackson has also won the electoral vote. Great! Andrew Jackson is going to be president. No. It's not going to happen that way. You see, the problem is that in order to be president, you have to win a majority of the electoral votes. And, Jackson didn't win the majority of the electoral votes. Now what do we do? Well, now what we do is, you look down here and you can see our old friend Henry Clay. Henry Clay's hobby was running for president. And, well, Henry Clay wasn't going to win. He was clearly not going to win. But he didn't really want to see Andrew Jackson become president. So what he did was he's actually going to shift his allegiance here, his 14% of the popular vote, of the electoral votes, he's going to give them to, boom, John Quincy Adams, or he's going to shift his allegiance and his votes are going to go to John Quincy Adams. And that is going to give John Quincy Adams the majority electoral votes. Consequently, John Quincy Adams will make Clay his Secretary of State, which at that time was a pretty good stepping stone to becoming the President of the United States. We'll see if that happens again. All right, so, well, you can imagine that Jackson was a little bit unhappy about this, and in fact, Jackson was not known for his mild and temperate manner. In fact, he was known for kind of flying off the handle. And Jackson and his supporters referred to this as the corrupt bargain. But Jackson's going to have to wait 4 more years before he's able to become President of the United States. Now, during this time, we also see increased political participation. What's going on is we're increasing our suffrage and by about 1830, the United States has turned to almost universal manhood suffrage, white manhood suffrage. There were 5 states during this time that did allow for suffrage among black males, but the majority of the states did not do that. Now, also during this time, and another factor that's going to contribute to increased political participation is newspapers. During this time, the steam-driven printing press is going to be invented, and people are going to be able to, printers are going to be able to print newspapers much faster and much cheaper than they ever have before, which raises the demand for newspapers. More people are going to read the news, more people are going to understand what's going on, more people are going to get ticked off, and they're going to be more likely to participate. Also, we see the growth, the development of some regional interests that we've talked about. We kind of touched upon when we talked about demographics, and we see some leaders growing in this area. Of course, in the South, we have the avid states' rightist John C. Calhoun. In the Northeast, the lettered Daniel Webster, and of course, representing the West was the inimitable, the great pacificator Henry Clay. So. Now, we already did the election of 1824. Now, Andrew Jackson's not done. And Andrew Jackson he wants to run for president again in 1828. And the bottom line is the reality is that John Quincy Adams' presidency was just fraught with conflict and difficulty, economic instability. He was always he always had this corrupt bargain thing hanging over his head. So Andrew Jackson and his campaign manager. You know, we're talking about campaign managers, right? Well, his campaign manager was a fellow by the name of Martin Van Buren. Yes, that's right, Martin Van Buren, who will later become president. And they're going to put together what will ultimately become the new Democratic Party. They're going to drop the Republican part of the name, and they're going to become the Democratic Party, and they're going to focus themselves on building their constituencies, building their voter base. And this is going to work fantastically. I don't think I have that election here. Okay, yeah, I don't. So, but that doesn't matter. So, Andrew Jackson is going to get elected pretty much in a landslide in 1828, and he's going to set about this new Jacksonian era, this new era of democracy. Now, there's a lot of things that happened under Jackson's administration. We're going to talk about them in later lectures, but for brevity, I want to just talk about two major things that are going to be a focus here. Oh, by the way, the significant thing about this Democratic Party is Andrew Jackson was able to win because his party was largely not regional. People from all over the country voted for him, with the exception of some places in the Northeast. Most people voted for Andrew Jackson. Henry Clay again ran for president and wasn't able to win, except for his own home state. Andrew Jackson actually is going to have a national appeal as a war hero. So at this point, the Democrats are the first truly national party, and under the leadership of Martin Van Buren, they're going to be able to create a coalition of southern, western states with enough northeastern states to really pull the party together. However, what's going to happen? The two factors that I really want to talk about here is the nullification crisis and Andrew Jackson's war against the National Bank. And what's going to end up happening? In a nutshell, what will happen is part of Jackson's appeal was to try to appeal to northeastern merchants, was to say, hey, look, we're gonna raise tariffs. We're gonna have a protective tariff. And now the problem with a protective tariff is it was good for merchants and manufacturers, but it wasn't particularly good for other people, especially if you were a wealthy person in the South who had to now pay more for your consumer goods that were coming into the country. So under the leadership of John C. Calhoun, big problem, John C. Calhoun was the Vice President of the United States. But under the leadership of John C. Calhoun, as much as he tried to remain anonymous, the state of South Carolina decided that they were not going to follow this the tariff. In fact, a tariff was passed in 1828, I believe, that was referred to as the Tariff of Abominations. It raised the tariffs, and then a new tariff was put into effect in 1832. And South Carolina said, you know what, we're not doing it. We're not going to do that. And South Carolina actually drafts an ordinance of nullification. In other words, South Carolina is saying that the states have the power to nullify federal laws that they find unconstitutional, and this tariff disproportionately adversely affects southern states than it does northern states, so therefore this is unconstitutional and we're going to nullify it. In fact, South Carolina actually said that they were willing to secede from the Union. Keep an eye on it. In other words, they were willing to leave the Union, become their own country, and call it a day if this tariff goes into effect. And of course, now Jackson is going to mix a little bit of force with a little bit of compromise here. He's going to get through Congress something called a force bill, which gives him permission to send troops into South Carolina to enforce this tariff. Because of that, other southern states are going to say, whoa, we're not getting involved in this. And South Carolina was kind of on its own. Also, Andrew Jackson's going to go down into... not Andrew Jackson, I'm sorry. Henry Clay is going to go down into South Carolina, talk to the South Carolina politicians and say, hey, look, why don't we back off on this tariff and have a compromise? So what they did was they passed another tariff in 1833 that is going to reduce the tariff, but still have a protective tariff, but a protective tariff with lower rates. And because between Jackson's belligerence and Henry Clay's compromise, South Carolina came back into the Union, and this situation was resolved. But this idea of nullification is going to keep coming back for quite a few years, and we're going to keep an eye on that. Now, probably more significantly to Jackson's presidency was his war against the National Bank. He ran largely on the premise that he was going to take on the bankers, whom he referred to as a den of vipers and thieves. And of course, this was extremely popular. And as a result of the Panic of 1819, a tremendous amount of distrust in the National Bank existed. So now it turned out the president of the National Bank was a fellow by the name of Biddle, I'm not sure why he did it, but he decided the bank charter was up for renewal in a few years. So Biddle decided, I'm going to get this charter renewed early. So he puts the charter, the bank charter, up for renewal. Congress renews the charter. The bill goes to Andrew Jackson. Andrew, boom, vetoes the bill. No charter for the National Bank. And then upon vetoing the bill, Jackson starts to transfer government funds from the National Bank into state banks, especially state banks that were kind of favorable to Andrew Jackson. So in essence, Andrew Jackson killed the bank. I mean, it was something that he was extremely proud of. Unfortunately, the consequence of this is that the revocation of the bank charter is going to create instability. So, for instance, one consequence is Francis Biddle is going to start calling in the bank's loans. Hey, look, all of this money is being transferred out of our accounts. We need more money. We're going to call in our loans. And that means that people are going to have to start paying back their debts, which means they're not going to be able to spend money, which means if people start not going to spend money, there's no reason to invest, and this is going to cause a real problem. Another problem was these new banks are going to say, hey, we're willing to make loans, and they started to make lots of loans, and they're actually going to start causing inflation to result, and this is going to create a lot of political instability, resulting in a recession in 1833, ultimately a panic in 1837, and as the economy starts to flounder, Andrew Jackson's largely going to get the blame for this. We're also going to see, as a result of this bank war, that we're going to see pretty much the end of the American system to an economic system called laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the idea that the government keeps its hands off of the economy, and the government pretty much allows business to run itself and allows banks to run themselves, and these things are going to be purely private concerns. And those combination private government entities that existed that made the American system successful are no longer going to be supported by the Democratic Party. So what we're seeing develop here is our new second party system. What will happen is Democrats at this stage of the game are going to be believers in a laissez-faire economy, non-interference from the government in anything. Bank matters, church matters, whatever, personal matters. The Democrats are not going to be in favor for that. The one thing that they're going to be in favor of the government doing is participating in guaranteeing territorial expansion. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about Manifest Destiny next time. This tended to appeal to small independent farmers and also some urban laborers. And it was of local appeal to Southerners, largely, and to a lot of people in the West. The Democratic Party appealed to those particular regions, not universally, but largely appealed to this. And now the Democrats, which had started out as a largely liberal party for their time, because of their success and because they've held that success for a long time, are going to be trying to hold on to that success and hold on to those institutions and create stability, and consequently the Democratic Party will represent a largely conservative ideology. Now, those people who disapproved of Andrew Jackson, there were plenty of people who disapproved of Andrew Jackson, they're going to leave the Democratic Party and they're going to form their own party, the Whig Party. And now this Whig Party under the leadership of Henry Clay, is going to be kind of let's have a strong central government. Let's push for this to go back to this old American system: a central bank, protective tariffs, social reforms, especially social reforms. And they're going to tend to be your more liberal party at this point. Things get a little bit confused. The Whigs, like the old Federalists, appeal to merchants and commercial farmers. We talked about the rising number of commercial farmers during this time. And they had a lot of their appeal in the North and in the northwestern states. And they're ideologically, like I said, they're going to appeal to a more liberal base, which means that what we're seeing is a redefining of what it means to be a liberal at this point, which is interesting, fascinating stuff. Now, in 1840, we're going to see another somewhat an interesting election. The Whigs, because of Andrew Jackson and the fall of the bank, there's economic instability. A lot of that instability is going to hit during the presidency of Martin Van Buren.